Welcome to Talk Shop. I'm Ariel, Okin, a New York-based interior designer, writer, and editor looking to bring a little bit of magic into our homes every day. After years as a writer and editor in the interiors world, I founded my own editorial site, Fenimore Lane, in 2020, and the Talk Shop interview series was born. Each week, I delve into the personal experiences of the top interior designers and tastemakers around the globe. In our final episode for the season, live from the Fenimore Lane Design Summit held at the Mayflower Inn Spa, I'm joined by fellow Mitzi Tastemaker Anthony D'Argenzio of Zio & Sons, along with our moderator, Luxe Magazine's Grace Beuley Hunt. In this conversation, we touch on the how-tos on decorative lighting and how we've styled some of the most popular fixtures from our Mitzi Tastemaker collections.
Welcome to today's second panel. Today, we are going to be talking about lighting. Our last panel was on color, and I feel like color and lighting are two things that are just not easy. You think they are, and there's a lot of nuance, and you got to ask the pros if you want to do it right. I'm Grace Beuley Hunt, Luxe Interior and Design Magazine's home and design editor, and I'm so excited to be here moderating with Anthony D'Argenzio and Ariel Okin. So before we start, I just would like if you could tell our audience in your own words who you are, what your business is, where you live in this world, and what brings you here today. So Anthony, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Anthony D'Argenzio. I live in Hudson, New York, which is in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley. I am a designer, creative, an entrepreneur, a jack of kind of all trades, but I currently work in the real estate industry and work in the design and home interior world segment. I have a line with Mitzi. I think that's me.
Real Renaissance man.
Well, I'm Ariel Okin. I am an interior designer. I'm also the founder and editor of Fenimore Lane, which is the company that brought all of this to everyone today. I also have a line with Mitzi. This is one of our lamps, the Clarendon lamp from my collection with Mitzi. And I'm just so thrilled to be here today. It's so fun watching everybody attend all these events.
It's fun for us too. Thank you for bringing us all here, Ariel. So yes, the common thread between these guys, in addition to being designers, is that they have these beautiful collaborations with Mitzi. And Mitzi, thank you so much for hosting today's conversation.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about their collections. We're going to talk about lighting do's and don'ts. And we're hoping you guys are going to leave with some really great takeaways. So I'd like to start with some foundational questions to help the audience get to know you a bit better. So Ariel, can you start by telling us about your collection with Mitzi? Because it really is an embodiment of your firm's aesthetic. And I know that kind of the initial inspiration was that you said you noticed a gap in the traditional home market for these kinds of pieces at this kind of price point. Yes. So can you tell me a bit about how it kind of came to be? Yeah, just like the story that really inspired that collection.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons why I find doing a licensed collection so exciting is because you can fill in that gap in the market that you have found. So for me, that was traditional lighting at an affordable price point, and Mitzi does lighting so beautifully at really accessible price points. And so I was thrilled to go on this journey with Mitzi. It was a 2-year process of design. I brought lots and lots and lots of reference images and hand sketches and all kinds of stuff over to them, and they beautifully, beautifully translated our inspiration into our collection. And there's a bunch of different pieces, from sconces to art lights and picture lights to table lamps and chandeliers. And there's one chandelier named after the town that I grew up in.
Which is what?
Gladwin. Yeah, it was just a wonderful experience working with Mitzi and just the whole process from A to Z of watching an idea in your head turn into a physical product that can live in someone's house, I think is one of the coolest things that I've experienced.
And how would you describe the common thread? Like, what is like, if the collection was like in a few words?
Our aesthetic, I always say, is sort of like traditional with a twist. So we are rooted in classicism and traditional design, but with an edge of contemporary, whether it's the way that we juxtapose contemporary art or photography over a really more classic English roll-arm sofa. And so I really wanted that juxtaposition in our collection. So there are pieces that feel a little bit more modern, and then there are pieces that feel a little bit more traditional. This one's on the more traditional side, but I do like the Empire shade because it gives it a little edge.
Yeah, definitely. It's a little old meets new. Is that your favorite piece?
It is, yeah. I love this piece.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
How about you, Anthony? I know sense of place really inspired your collection as well, and you're in the Hudson Valley. So tell us a little bit more about the Hudson Valley, kind of informing the design directive and how your collection came to life.
Yeah. I was actually born and raised in California and moved to New York City, and felt like I was drawn to New York just because of the like old soulness to it and the history and the architecture, and didn't know a lot about the Hudson Valley until being in New York City, and started going up to New York Hudson by the train because, as all New York City people, no cars. So I'm like, where can I go? So I started just taking the train up north and discovered Hudson really from like the antique world and the amazing architecture and the history, and was really just drawn to the town itself. Has like over 100 different styles of architecture, and if you've never been, it's quite beautiful and eye candy. So ping-ponging between New York City and and Hudson in particular, I started just renovating different properties and starting my career more as like a stylist and creative director in New York City, using interiors, real estate really as like canvases for creating interesting spaces, and really being inspired by the building itself versus like, I always led like the structure kind of guide the overall aesthetic of the whatever project I was working on. And the same went for my line with Mitzi. So thinking of working with older buildings and properties, but bringing it into a modern, fresh way. And I feel like Mitzi does a really great job of that because it's a refreshing brand at a really great price point, but like still has a lot of influence of heritage and quality materials and history. So my line was very much inspired by classic silhouettes and different eras of architecture styles and design. So there's a little Art Nouveau, mid-century, industrial kind of nods to all the different pieces. So like a classic sphere, but with like very ornate kind of like little details that I was very kind of inspired by. And then another light, actually named after my daughter, Havana, was a classic Art Nouveau, like the squiggly line, but done felt very fresh and new with a sphere in the middle. So the line is eclectic, I would say, but also could lean classic, but also fresh, and could go in a contemporary or an old home. So I was very
architecturally inspired.
Architecturally inspired, definitely.
So cool.
Yeah.
What about this one?
Yeah, this one is just more in the subtle details. So the body of it is, it's obviously a classic mushroom shape, but the body is a crackled ceramic. So it's all about, the subtle variation of the glaze, and then a classic or like shiny pop of brass to elevate a space. And then there's these two little cute pull chains versus one.
You're like in love with this lamp.
I do love this lamp. It just, it's a little fun and like a little piece of jewelry for a room.
It's beautiful. Yeah. I love that these are here because I feel like they really help people understand your lighting sensibilities and like your aesthetics without you having to say anything.
Yes.
So glad these are here. So to be approached to design a lighting collection, you obviously have to know how to light a room and have some chops there. So I want to talk about how to do that properly. So, I mean, we've all been in poorly lit rooms and they really don't feel good. And I'd love to know, as designers, and Anthony, especially like with your like real estate side to the business as well, like optimizing lighting to make people want to buy a house, when does lighting enter the picture? Is there a formula? Is it always one of the first elements? Is it an afterthought that takes a lot of love and care? Like, how do you guys each approach your lighting design? Anthony, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Well, 2 stages of lighting. So like when I'm doing my own interior design, I'll consider that a little bit more thoughtful for my clients in a real estate world, because it's more like you're almost like editing a home or like trying to make it its best in a cost-effective way.
Sure.
So I think when you're designing a room and you're considering the factors of the lighting, it's important to think of like what influences of natural light you have, how the room is going to be used, obviously, and how you like the feeling you want to evoke when you're in the space and the lights are on or they're off. So all of those pieces together will kind of inform like, all right, I want a statement chandelier, or I want something a little bit less I really want it to be functional and not hit my head. So I want everything like the ceilings are short. So I want it to go something higher to the ceiling or a ceiling mount. So first figuring out like what you want the room to feel like, I think is the most important thing. And then the function aspect. And then you could bring in the creativity elements of whatever your design style is or your finish of the fixture. I think it's important to have that like tell a story and a symphony and make it feel effortless at the same time. So it's a little bit of a challenge at times, especially if you're working in an old house with short ceilings or old wiring and you're really just trying to utilize what's there already. But for clients, a lot of the time when I'm, so I have two brands. Zio & Sons is my design firm with the Mitzi line, and then This Old Hudson is my real estate practice where we stage, style, and also have a team of agents where we sell luxury homes in the Hudson Valley. So as a designer, clients are constantly trying to pick my brain when they're preparing a home to sell. Like, what do I do here? What do I do there? Staging, styling, paint colors, lighting. And lighting is a really big one because especially with a home that feels aged or, maybe outdated, lighting is a really great tool to use to make it feel fresh, but also create value and make it feel special and artistic. So like in a kitchen that feels maybe, tired, putting in a nice light fixture could really elevate it pretty effortlessly.
I mean, I guess it sounds like very case specific, whether you're doing like a major renovation or you're just kind of putting some like chic lipstick on something. Yeah. But I mean, in general, like where does it come in? Are you doing a lighting design before you have your paint colors and your furniture selects? Like, is it one of like the leading considerations? Or are you more approaching it as kind of like, the garnish on the space?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not doing a ton of residential design for clients anymore. Most of my practice is spent on doing my own renovations and, flips and, projects where I'm putting my name behind, and then my licensing product design collaborations. And then a lot of the design that I'm influencing people on is like preparing a home to sell or even doing like full, like if they're doing a full gut renovation where I come in pretty early on and I'm saying, here's the palette that I think, from a resale perspective, I think is going to do really well,
right? But
also make it feel interesting through lighting. So I'm doing pretty early on, like from before the socket even goes in the wall to at the very tail end, or, in a spot where they're just trying to get the top dollar for their property and you're kind of working backwards, or like, all right, here's the spots you have placements on, you should use this type of fixture. So it's really a mix, but it's really important. And in any stage of your life, you could include new lighting. So
I do feel like it's such an impactful change that isn't necessarily a huge change to a space. Ariel, how about you? How do you approach lighting design in your projects? Is it different, or do you have a formula?
It depends on what stage we're coming in at. I really love getting in on ground up builds and gut renovations because we can create our own lighting plans, and that's really exciting to me. So being able to do the electrical walkthrough with the architect and say, this is where the sconces are going to go, and this is how, and I hate can lights. So I try to minimize using them as much as I can. Nobody looks good in down lighting. So, those considerations are important to me. And I always like to put everything on dimmers. So I make sure that that's, hardwired at the beginning of a project. Ideally, it's nice when we get in on that ground level. But we have a project in Cape Cod right now that was built in the early 2000s. It has, the ceiling literally looks like a constellation of stars of like hi-hats. And we are fixing it. So it doesn't, that's not to say that like if you have a pre-existing structure that's already wired and done that you can't fix that. So, and electricians are wonderful resources for what you can and can't do.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to kind of veer off of that question with you, Ariel. Like if someone was paying you for a mini consult, you're going to give out some free advice today. But if you're bewildered by lighting design, you don't know task ambient, you don't know what you want, you don't even know aesthetically what you're gravitating towards, which I imagine a lot of your clients are coming to you kind of not knowing where to begin. So like, where do you start? What's your advice to somebody who just like needs to get their lighting figured out.
Yeah. I mean, the way that I like to approach lighting is you need to have it coming from multiple heights and multiple sources. So you need some sconce lighting. One overhead is nice. I prefer like one decorative overhead fixture.
Mm-hmm.
And then like floor and task lamps. So, lamps like these, table lamps, just having it undulate throughout the room so that nobody's getting hit from one very hard angle.
Just different levels of light.
Different levels of light. And then also making sure that everything is dimmable. I'm really big on that.
What if dim is not in the cards, like you rent an apartment like me? Like what about like
you
wattage?
Can. So when I lived in the city, rented the whole time. I lived there for like 11 years and I installed dimmers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They're not
just
expensive.
Like ask your landlord, like, hey, can I
they're
do
not
this for you?
expensive. You can get them from like Lutron. They're not like hard to do. And
they have like apps for like light bulbs and stuff.
Yeah, they have apps they have smart light bulbs so you can like do it on your phone. Very cool.
What a world.
Yeah.
Anthony, that's a good lead into this question for you. I have a quote here from you, which is that if lighting is done right, it lasts a long time and it improves your property value. So I'd love to know like what that actually looks like. If I'm selling my house, what are you telling me to do with my lighting to improve its resale value?
You have to use the Zio and Sons collection from Mitzi. No. I think, if you're buying a mid-century home in Palm Springs, or I'm not selling mid-century homes in Palm Springs, but
one day,
from an example of like following the inspiration, like leading the inspiration from the architecture style. So if you're picking a fixture and a style that's going to like age well versus going to maybe adventurous or like maybe mixing of metals in a weird way or things that just feel off, or like if it feels avant-garde to you now, imagine how that's going to feel in 3 years to someone that might not have the same style as you. So just being a little cautious in regard to your styles. Obviously you still want it to feel fun and creative and fresh, but I think it's important to just pick pieces that age well, just good quality materials. I think brass is just like a timeless finish that I'm still surprised. It's just
unlacquered
unlacquered. Yeah, it just keeps going and going. And like,
don't lacquer your brass.
Yeah.
You heard it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like
let it develop a patina.
Yeah,
It's
let
nice.
it develop a patina is right. So I think
Unlacquered
just
brass.
classic shapes, classic finishes, and letting that just do its job and don't overthink it. You don't have to like if you're not a designer or a design expert, don't go crazy and like pick the most adventurous thing, because
classic is classic for a reason, especially when it comes to homes. I think it's the biggest investment oftentimes that people make. And so going down a trend wormhole is never a good idea, I think.
But on the flip side, like, has there
Says
ever
the
been
market editor.
has there ever been a time when there was like a really memorable fixture that you think like sold a house? Like, is there a time for statement lighting when you are?
I think statement doesn't have to mean it's not classic too. There's a really gorgeous vintage toll fixture that we found recently at Antique and Artisan in Stamford that's just unbelievable, and it's so unique. But it could have lived in the 18th century and it could live now, so like it doesn't, just because something's classic doesn't mean that it's not unique or interesting.
Totally. Like we talk about at the magazine, like what really doesn't go out of style. Like what's the one piece that's just like always looks good. And we always come back to the Nakashima lantern light. Like, it just looks good in every room.
Totally.
It's just
and also I think a bell jar lantern is just so classic.
Oh yeah, especially with that marble.
And Celery did something really cool. If you want to really look at detail, Celery Campbell designed this hotel, and she wrapped this like marbleized paper around each candle holder, which is so cool.
It's all in the details. It's so good.
I mean, think about classic, like what is the original fixture? Like a gas lantern?
Yeah. Still looks good.
Still looking good.
So true.
300 years later.
Yeah.
And it still feels fresh.
It really does. So get the look talking about like how to recreate your mood at home, Ariel. I mean, besides getting that beautiful lamp, but if people are trying to kind of bring this traditional with a twist sensibility into their home via lighting, like accepting actual fixtures, like what do you recommend? Is it kind of like classic shapes, classic finishes?
I think traditional with a twist can go either way in terms of lighting, because you could either bring the traditional in with a really beautiful chinoiserie lamp, or you go modern with the lighting and that's your twist. So it can kind of go either way. And my house kind of shows both of that. Like I have some really, really classic pieces in my house, like lanterns like this. And I have this in my house. But then I also have some really angular white plaster modern fixtures in my house in a very formal dining room.
So the three lamps in your house are plaster,
I
lanterns.
have a lot of like I have a chinoiserie vintage lamp in my family room that I really love. I love oversized lighting too. Like I think an oversized lamp is really something that has some chunkiness and some weight to it.
Yeah.
It can really make a statement in a beautiful way and hold the ground around it visually nicely. I love white plaster. We use a lot of white plaster and you can use it in so many different ways. Like it could look modern depending on the shape, or it can look traditional. And I love a glass bell jar. Like those are sort of my...
Yeah. Just can't go wrong.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to scale because that was a really good note. I feel like undersized lighting is like one of the cardinal sins. And getting the
and
scale
people don't
right is really
realize
hard sometimes if it's like a huge space or
Yeah.
a very small space.
Yeah.
Do you have any like real rules of thumb for sizing a light properly that you can share?
I mean, I think when you're lighting something like art, like an art light, it needs to go wider than the art. Like, you know, it
The
needs
art
to
light
be,
needs to be wider than the art
no,
itself?
the art needs
the
to
art.
be wider
I was like,
than the...
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. You know, I think when you get things like scale wrong, those are the little imperceivable things that can make a room feel off. Table lamps, I think, are really up to you. I think it's like whatever feels right to you. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. But like you need 7 foot clearance. We always do 7 feet of clearance above to make sure that people aren't going to hit their heads on things from overhead lighting.
Yep.
Not that anybody is 7 feet in my house. I'm 4'10", so.
But that's a good rule of thumb. Like 7 feet.
Yeah.
Do not hang your fixture lower than that.
Yeah.
That's a good tip. Do you have anything to add to that, Anthony, in terms of like scaling properly?
Yeah, I think scale is important, like obviously depending on the size of the room and all that. But another like important thing, especially when you're working with, if you like old things and it's hard to find reproductions in multiple, being able to scale it in the sense of having multiple that match. So I think knowing where to place multiple fixtures in a room is really an art in itself of like where do if you have a wall of 3 sconces, like how much space between the wall or where to put the pendants is really important. People will either put them too close or like not at the right height. I think really
or
like
one lone sconce.
Yeah, one
weird
like
spot.
So I think
They always need a friend, right?
Yeah, they need a friend.
Like, considering the factors of like headspace, counter height, where's your art? Like before you just start plopping away with fixtures, figuring out what else is going to be living in that space, because you want it to feel like, and I always think 3 is better than 4 or 5 is better than 6.
Yeah, I agree
Odds
with that.
feel more natural, especially visually when you're in a room. Like if it's too even, it feels like some cookie cutter, like contractor made that decision or something.
Mika Tenhov always says that to me whenever we're like shooting something and she's styling. She's like, never do something in pairs.
Yeah.
Like always one off.
Rule of 3s.
Yeah.
Even when
or
I'm like
more.
styling.
I mean, the rule of 3s
yeah.
is like an art rule for a reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Good tip.
Yeah.
Anthony, I want to talk about staging, and you were like mentioning, making something like shootable or Instagram worthy. Anthony's an amazing Instagram follow, by the way.
Yeah.
Do you have any moves or gestures or tricks like when you're trying to get like the hero shot of a space? Like what lighting just like looks editorial worthy?
I think like back to where you're saying like multi-dimensional, you want like heights and angles. Like try to shoot things like here, not here, or not like you don't want like
not from under.
Yeah, again, like the rule of thirds. Like if you're thinking of like a helpful tip for your phone is putting the grid on, and it separates the sections of your phone into 3 even spaces. And when you're shooting interiors or really anything, you want the even amount of space for your floor and the ceiling and like whatever subject you're shooting. So like if you just follow that rule of thirds and like spacing looks even, I think it's just more enjoyable on the eye. Like you don't want too much of one thing, or like don't try to get too creative, because your eye is like people are drawn to certain aesthetics for certain reasons because of like human nature. So don't try to get too crazy with your angles.
Don't get
Natural,
crazy.
I mean, if you're shooting a room, natural light.
Yeah.
And turn all your lights off when you're
Always.
shooting a room.
Always. Follow-up question to that. when you're staging, is there one fixture, maybe outside of your own, because we know those are the most beautiful, but is there like one that you kind of go back to again and again, like one light fixture that just always looks really good and is always a hit?
When you're shooting like interiors or like creative spaces, I always think it's like best to just honestly, the funkier, the weirder things, the better. Like you obviously want like a classic thing, but like a pop of something or like something that looks, it doesn't have to be lighting, but like having a unique thing. So like I like to work with a lot of antique and vintage objects and even light fixtures. So having a mix of new lighting and old lighting is really important to make your home feel eclectic and not like a catalog. So those are the best spaces, I think, where it feels it's got a nice story of things. You can't have everything old and you can't have everything new, but if you could have, you know, maybe 60% new lighting and some beautiful ceramics and antique, maybe like a light fixture that doesn't even work, but like it's just made to make, it adds character. So I think that's really important. It doesn't have to be like that one special piece, but I think you need that one special object or that one special thing to say, oh, I've never seen that, or that feels special.
Yes. In the mix. So I'd love if you could each share a favorite project that really allowed you to play with lighting, like a memorable lighting moment from your life and maybe any lessons you learned from it. Ariel, we can start with you.
One of my most recent favorite projects is a ground up build that we just installed in March. So we did the lighting plan for that with the architect, and that was really, really wonderful. I love doing ground up builds for that reason because we can really dial in on how we want this to adjust throughout the day. What are we thinking about for dinner parties? Like, how is this going to function? So I think that's really exciting, and I really love being able to do the lighting plan with the architect. I think that's really fun.
Yeah. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. If it's custom, it's going to be good. How about you, Anthony? Any memorable lighting projects of late?
I recently renovated my own home, which was totally off-brand for me, a 1970s log cabin.
Oh, wow.
And log houses don't have drywall. Did you know that?
No.
Everything is surface mounted. There's like, so like designing lighting in a structure like that is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
So I had to get very creative and like embrace mixing of metals, but also like conduit, like leaning into having things be exposed and like being quirky, I think is interesting. So like in that project, we had all these like beams and I wanted like good lighting because it felt, you know, dark and log cabiny. So using, you know, conduit that was exposed, mixing of old and new, it somehow came together, but like it was a challenge both aesthetically and like from a design perspective.
Yeah, that's a brain bender. Can we see pictures of this somewhere?
The New York Times.
Ooh, fancy. Okay. Well, should have brought a poster board
really
in.
Casual.
So one more question and then we'll move to lightning round and then we can open it up for your burning lighting questions. But I'd love if you could each share a cardinal do and a cardinal don't of lighting for our audience. Ariel.
A cardinal do is install dimmers, and a cardinal don't is don't put hi-hats in your ceiling.
Nice and simple. How about you, Anthony?
Do use wall sconces. I think it's great for a room. Just even if you have the height, just adds a lot of depth to a space. Don't install LED fluorescent bulbs.
Yes.
That's my new apartment I moved into 2 days ago.
And like
I never have overhead on anyway.
If you go to like Walgreens, every bulb is like fluorescent at this point.
Well,
so like,
wow, there's this the hot tip. There's a store by the D&D that like has a surplus.
The warm one?
Yes.
Yeah. If you're going to do
Is
an
it
LED bulb,
lumens?
get it the warm shit. There's like one bulb at Home Depot that's like warm temperature.
Yeah.
Warm
LED.
LED
You know what?
bulb.
It's still bad.
Annie actually has a great, on her AMA's highlight, has a great guide to Kelvin wattage and like what to buy, and she
Like
links
3,000
the
is the good
bulb.
one?
27, like 2750, I think. Also,
This is Annie
Meyershire,
Annie
who was
Meyershire.
just in the previous panel.
This Oak House
This
is her
Oak House on
Instagram if you want to go
She
check
has
out her lighting tips.
She has a really good guide on Kelvin wattage.
This is a whole topic in itself. The right light bulb is another huge thing.
Shape, everything.
Yeah. light bulbs is a whole.
This is the really fun stuff that we do all day.
Okay, so lightning round to close things out here. If you could only use one lighting fixture for the rest of your days, what would it be, Anthony?
I think honestly, just like a classic pendant, white shade, clean little bulb. Call it a day. I use it all the time.
Just a white shade classic pendant.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's not in my collection, so don't get mad at me, Mitzi. But just like, if you could source like a French 1920s just disc with a clean, pretty bulb and like a wire, like that's my favorite.
That sounds very chic. How about you, Ariel? One lighting fixture.
I love like an English style lantern. Like a very like Georgian lantern is sort of my go-to.
Beautiful.
Favorite.
What do you consider to be the best lit room in the world? Like a real exemplar of lighting design?
Definitely Bemelman's at the Carlisle.
Yeah,
it's
that's
just
a good
so
mood.
glowy. The walls. And like, that's another thing I think lamp shades also are important. And like a card shade gives off a really nice glow. And then everybody just looks nicer in it.
Yeah. I think hospitality, you get so inspired by lighting, like
Definitely.
just hotel lobbies and like restaurants, and like they go crazy with lighting.
Yeah, they're so memorable.
Yeah.
What's yours,
Yeah,
Anthony?
I was thinking about that, and this is hard, but I was thinking like where in New York City that has historic architecture with beautiful lighting. And I don't know if you guys have seen the Swan Room at 9 Orchard. That room, like the light fixtures are insane. The ceiling's insane. Did you know the room?
It's really pretty.
So pretty.
Is that the main like bank teller space?
Yeah, it's an old bank.
Yeah.
And just Google it.
Okay.
So funny.
Or go and have a cocktail because the space
It's
is
really,
yeah,
really
it's
cool.
Even better.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Okay. And the lighting trend that you'd love to see die forever?
You go first.
I mean, I'm like a broken record, but like can't lighting. I hate it. If you can't tell.
What about track lighting?
Oh yeah, no track lighting. Rip that out.
You could actually like, I had to do this for a project with Mitzi when I had a pop up in Hudson where you could actually, there's like little sockets. You could just pop right into it and just take the electricity out of a track light. So they might be ugly, but you could rework it to make it work.
Interesting.
Yeah. So don't, like if you're a renter and there's track lights, there's like a little adapter thing that you could like connect to it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
Okay.
The more you know.
And last but not least, lighting design words to live by.
Keep it dim.
Anthony?
let the quality shine.
Ooh, beautiful. Well, I think that wraps up our time. Thank you so much to our panelists, to our hosts, to the Mayflower for having this amazing space for us to talk about design and geek out together. Thank you all. Enjoy the day.
Thank you so much. That's a wrap on season 2 of Talk Shop. Thank you to every incredible guest who joined me this season. To all of you who have taken the time to listen to our show, we are so grateful and love seeing you share your favorite parts of each episode on Instagram. I'll be back in the fall with more thoughtful conversations about design and interiors. Please keep the feedback coming and send us suggestions for future guests. Have a wonderful summer, and I can't wait to be back with you all in the fall.